All right, so we're diving deep today into
So,
this Simon Sinek video
oh yeah,
that you found called 50 Minutes for the Next 50 Years of Your Life.
big title.
I know, right? It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah,
And it's basically like a pep talk
Yeah.
for anyone who's kind of, feeling stuck or looking for some inspiration.
little boost.
Exactly, a boost. And he lays out 5 rules, he calls them.
Rules.
But I wouldn't say they're like hard and fast rules, more like principles or guidelines.
Yeah, more like jumping off points for thinking about things differently.
Exactly. So they're not commandments. It's not like you have to do this or else.
No.
It's more like food for thought.
Yeah, like conversation starters.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So rule number 1 is go after what you want.
Straightforward.
Yeah, and of course, Sinek, being Sinek,
Right.
he tells a story to illustrate this.
Of course he does.
So picture this. He's at a race. He's done.
Right.
And there's like a table with free bagels.
Oh, nice.
Right, like who doesn't love a free bagel?
Exactly.
So he sees these bagels and he's like, all right, I'm going for it.
Makes sense.
But his friend is totally fixated on the line.
The line for the bagels.
Yeah, there's like a long line.
Yeah.
And his friend's like, oh man, look at that line. It's not even worth it.
So he misses out.
Totally. And Sinek's point is that we do this all the time.
We focus on the obstacle instead of the goal.
Exactly. Instead of seeing that bagel and being like, oh, awesome, free bagel.
Right.
We get so caught up in the line, the perceived obstacle.
The hurdle.
Yeah. And like that hurdle becomes this mental block.
And we talk ourselves out of it.
Totally. We're like, oh, it's too hard. It's not worth the effort.
So think about it. Have you encountered any lines lately?
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Something you wanted but talked yourself out of because of the line.
Wow. That's such a good question to sit with.
Yeah, it's worth reflecting on.
And you know what? It actually ties in perfectly with Sinek's second rule,
Okay.
which is sometimes you're the problem.
Oh, wow. That's direct.
Right. It's a bit of a reality check.
Yeah, for sure.
So to illustrate this, he goes way back in time
Okay.
to the 1800s.
Oh, wow.
And he talks about this phenomenon called the Black Death of childbed.
Was that?
Basically, women were dying after childbirth
Oh, no.
at alarming rates, and no one could figure out why.
This sounds terrible.
It was awful, and it turns out
What was it?
it was the doctors.
The doctors.
Yeah, they were the ones spreading the disease
Oh, I know.
because they weren't washing their hands
Oh, no.
after performing autopsies.
Oh, my gosh.
So they'd go from like handling corpses to delivering babies.
Oh, that's just...
I know, it's horrifying, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
Right.
When a doctor finally figured out that hand washing was the solution,
Oh, okay.
you'd think the other doctors would be like, oh, thank goodness.
Right. Problem solved.
But they weren't.
Worried.
They resisted. They were like, no way, that can't be it.
Why?
Because it challenged their existing beliefs, their egos.
So they were attached to being right.
Exactly. And this is something Sinek talks about a lot.
What's that?
Confirmation bias.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that.
It's this tendency we have to seek out information that confirms what we already believe.
Even if it's wrong.
Even if it's wrong, we're like those doctors clinging to our old ideas.
So how do we avoid that?
That's a great question, and I think that's something we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into these rules.
Okay.
So we've talked about going after what we want, acknowledging our own blind spots,
Right.
but what about when we need help?
Yeah, that's a big one.
And that's where rule number 3 comes in, take care of each other.
Okay, I like that.
And Sinek uses the Navy SEALs as an example here.
Interesting choice.
I know, right? You'd think the SEALs, these elite warriors, would be all about like the lone wolf mentality.
All right, survival of the fittest.
But Sinek points out that it's actually the opposite.
Oh, right.
The ones who make it through the grueling training
Yeah.
are the ones who help each other out.
Ah, interesting.
They rely on each other. They support each other.
So it's about teamwork.
It's all about teamwork. And it's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
I've heard that.
So it's not just about individual success. It's about collective success.
Makes sense.
But here's the question for all of us listening. How often do we actually apply that in our own lives?
Yeah, good point.
Are we reaching out for support when we need it?
That's a tough one.
It is, right. It can be hard to admit we need help.
It can feel like a weakness.
Exactly. But Sinek's arguing that it's actually a strength.
It takes strength to ask for help.
Yes, and it's not just about asking for help. It's also about offering help.
To others.
To others, to those around us, to our community.
Yeah, like being that rising tide.
Exactly. And I think that brings us beautifully to rule number 4, which is all about the power of listening. Be the last to speak.
Ooh, I like that one.
And Sinek tells this great story about Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
who was known for always being the last to speak in meetings.
Really?
Yeah, and it wasn't about being silent or passive.
What was it about then?
It was about deeply listening to everyone else's perspective.
Before sharing his own.
Exactly. He understood that true leadership involves understanding, not just being understood.
So it's about active listening.
Absolutely. It's about being present and really hearing what others have to say.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own thoughts.
I know, right? We're like just waiting for our turn to talk.
Instead of actually listening.
Exactly. But imagine if we all practiced being the last to speak more often.
That would change things.
It would transform our conversations, our relationships, our decision-making.
Yeah, it'd be a total shift.
Okay, so now we're getting to rule number 5, and Sinek says this one's his favorite.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's all about humility, and he tells this story about a former Undersecretary of Defense who realized something interesting after leaving office.
What was that?
All those perks he used to have, the fancy coffee cups, the first-class flights.
The VIP treatment?
Exactly. He realized they weren't for him personally.
They were for the position.
They were for the position he held.
Wow, that's a perspective shift.
Yeah. Right. And Sinek's point is that we can easily fall into this trap of entitlement.
Thinking we deserve special treatment.
Yeah. And his rule number 5 is basically a reminder that we all deserve a styrofoam cup.
Styrofoam cup.
Yeah, it's about gratitude, recognizing what we have.
Instead of focusing on what we lack.
Exactly. So let me ask you,
Okay.
what are you taking for granted today?
Good question.
And what are you truly grateful for?
Yeah, those are good things to think about.
It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle.
And forget to appreciate the simple things.
The little things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered Sinek's 5 rules.
That was a lot.
It was a lot, right? But he doesn't stop there.
There's more.
There's more. There are some additional key themes from the video that I think are really worth unpacking.
Okay, bring it on.
One of them is this idea of mental fitness.
Mental fitness.
Now, Sinek deliberately chooses mental fitness over mental health.
What's the difference?
He sees it like physical fitness.
Okay.
It's an ongoing journey, not a destination.
I like that.
Right. There will be good days and bad days.
Like with exercise.
It's periods of strength and periods of struggle.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of mental well-being.
No, it's about building resilience, learning to cope with challenges, and developing healthy habits. It's like going to the mental gym.
I love that analogy.
So we all have these mental muscles that need to be exercised and strengthened.
And sometimes we need a rest day.
Yes, exactly like with physical fitness.
A chance to recharge and recover.
It's about recognizing that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And it's about seeking support when we need it.
Like we'd see a trainer or a therapist.
Exactly. There's no shame in asking for help.
No shame at all.
Whether it's talking to a friend,
Yeah.
seeking professional guidance, or simply taking some time for self-care.
Self-care is important.
It's crucial. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
Going after what we want, recognizing our own role in creating obstacles,
Right.
taking care of each other, the power of listening, cultivating humility and gratitude,
Yeah.
and the importance of mental fitness.
This is great, but I have a feeling there's more.
Oh, there's so much more to come. Join us for the next part of our deep dive,
I can't wait.
where we'll explore Sinek's insights on vulnerability, the dangers of technology addiction,
Ooh, that's a big one.
and the importance of finding your spark.
Finding your spark. That sounds exciting.
It is. Stay tuned. All right, so picking up where we left off in our deep dive with Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
One thing that really stood out to me was his warnings about technology. He's like a bit of a tech skeptic.
In some ways, yeah, he sees the downsides.
Definitely. And he's particularly concerned about how technology is impacting our attention spans.
Especially for younger generations.
Right. They've grown up with smartphones and social media.
All they've ever known.
And Sinek argues that this constant connection, this instant gratification, it's actually rewiring our brains.
It's like we're being reprogrammed.
In a way, yeah. And he uses this really powerful analogy.
Okay.
He compares it to giving teenagers free reign of the liquor cabinet.
Oh, wow.
It's provocative, right?
Definitely makes you think.
But it highlights the addictive nature of these platforms.
Especially during those formative years.
Exactly, when their brains are still developing.
It's like we're setting them up for a lifetime of addiction.
In a way, yeah. And it's not just about the time we spend on our devices.
Right.
It's about how that constant stimulation is affecting our ability to focus,
To be patient.
to work towards long-term goals.
Yeah, we're becoming less resilient.
Less able to cope with challenges.
Like we're expecting life to be one big highlight reel.
And when we encounter setbacks or things that require effort,
we give up too easily.
we want the reward without the journey.
It's like reading the last page of a book first.
Exactly. You get the plot twist, but you miss the whole story.
The character development, the nuances.
The emotional impact.
Yeah, and that's what worries Sinek.
He's worried that we're sacrificing depth for speed, skimming the surface of life instead of diving deep.
Right, it's like we're always rushing to the next thing.
Never really savoring the present moment.
And that's a shame because there's so much beauty and richness to be found in those everyday moments.
So how do we combat this?
How do we reclaim our attention spans?
Sinek suggests some practical strategies.
Like what?
Things like charging our phones in a different room,
Oh,
leaving them at home when we go out with friends.
so creating boundaries.
Exactly. Having no phone policies during meetings.
It's about being more intentional,
With our technology use.
not letting it control us.
I love that he emphasizes that it's not about demonizing technology altogether.
Right, it's a tool
It can be a powerful tool, but it's up to us to use it wisely.
to be the masters of our textures, not the slaves.
So think about it. When was the last time you had a conversation with someone where you were both fully present without the distraction of phones?
That's a good question.
It's something to strive for.
Definitely, because those moments of genuine connection,
Yeah.
they're so important.
They nourish our souls. They make us feel seen and heard and understood.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about the potential pitfalls of technology,
Right.
but Sinek's critique goes beyond that. He's also concerned about certain business practices
Like what?
that are creating toxic environments
Docs.
and eroding our sense of purpose.
Okay, so what kind of practices are we talking about?
Well, one of the things he calls out is shareholder supremacy.
Shareholder supremacy.
The idea that a company's sole responsibility is to maximize profits for its shareholders.
Okay, and what's wrong with that?
Well, Sinek argues that this focus on profits over people
Yeah.
has created a culture of fear and distrust in the workplace.
Like everyone's just worried about the bottom line.
Exactly, and employees feel like they're just cogs in a machine.
Disposable.
Their worth tied solely to their output.
Not their well-being.
It's a dehumanizing system.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bleak.
It can be, and it breeds anxiety, disengagement, a lack of loyalty.
So it's not good for anyone in the long run.
No. And he contrasts this with the culture at the Four Seasons Hotel,
Okay.
where employees feel valued and supported.
How so?
He tells the story of Noah, a barista who says he loves his job
Wow.
because the managers genuinely care about their employees' well-being.
That's amazing.
It is, and it shows that it's possible to create a work environment
Yeah.
where people feel both valued and productive.
So it's not an either situation
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
between people and profits.
And Sinek argues that when companies prioritize their employees, it actually translates into a better customer experience.
Which ultimately benefits everyone.
It's a win-win.
I like that.
And he also talks about the negative impact of mass layoffs,
Yeah.
which he sees as a symptom of this short-sighted focus on shareholder profits.
So it's all connected,
It is, and he argues that mass layoffs create a climate of fear and uncertainty,
where everyone's worried about losing their job.
even if they're performing well.
It's a recipe for burnout.
And disengagement.
Yeah, who can focus on doing good work
Yeah.
when they're constantly worried about being let go.
Exactly. And he makes this really powerful point about how these practices send a clear message to employees
What's that?
that your worth is tied to your output, not your humanity.
Ouch, that's harsh.
It is, and it erodes trust and loyalty
Yeah, it creates a transactional relationship.
instead of a meaningful one.
So what's the alternative?
Sinek argues that we need to break free from this mindset
This profit-driven mindset,
and shift the focus from profit to purpose.
finding meaning in our work.
He believes that companies have a responsibility to create environments
Yeah.
that foster human connection, encourage growth, and contribute to a greater good.
So it's about more than just making money.
Exactly. It's about making a difference.
And that applies to individuals as well.
Absolutely. And that brings us to this idea of finding our own spark,
Or smart.
that thing that lights us up, that gives us a sense of purpose.
The thing that makes us feel truly alive,
Yes. And Sinek believes that everyone has a spark.
but it's often buried.
Under layers of societal expectations, self-doubt, fear of failure,
Like we've lost touch with our passions.
with our inner child, that sense of wonder and excitement,
So how do we reconnect with that?
Sinek suggests we ask ourselves some questions.
Like what?
What did I love to do as a child?
Okay.
What activities make me lose track of time? What am I naturally curious about?
Those are good questions.
And he emphasizes that it's never too late to find our spark.
Never too late.
It might be a hobby, a volunteer activity, a new career path.
It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it lights you up.
Exactly. And he encourages us to pursue it with passion and purpose.
To let that energy fuel our lives.
So we've talked about the dangers of technology addiction, the need for more humane business practices, and the importance of finding our spark.
A lot of good stuff.
But there's one more crucial element of Sinek's message that I want to touch on.
Okay, I'm listening.
The importance of having a strong why.
Your why.
This is a concept that Sinek is really passionate about.
I've heard him talk about this before.
He believes that having a clear sense of purpose,
Yeah.
a why that drives our actions,
Is essential for a fulfilling life.
Exactly. And he argues that when we have a strong why, we're more resilient in the face of challenge.
We're more motivated to achieve our goals.
And we're more likely to live a life that is both impactful and meaningful,
It's like having a compass,
guiding our decisions.
keeping us on track.
So how do we find our why?
That's the big question.
Sinek encourages us to ask ourselves some powerful questions.
Like what?
Why do I do what I do?
Okay.
What impact do I want to have on the world? What legacy do I want to leave behind?
Those are deep.
They are, but they can help us clarify our values.
Our passions.
And articulate a why that can guide our decisions and inspire us to live a life of purpose.
It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Finding a reason that resonates with our hearts and motivates us to make a difference.
And that sense of purpose can be found in all sorts of places.
In our relationships, our work, our creative pursuits, our community involvement.
It's about aligning our actions with our values.
Contributing to something that matters to us deeply.
And Sinek reminds us that finding our why isn't a one-time event.
It's an ongoing journey.
Of self-discovery and exploration.
It's about being open to new experiences, listening to our intuition, and allowing our passions to guide us. So we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
From the dangers of technology addiction to the need for more humane business practices.
To the importance of finding our spark and having a strong why.
There's so much to think about.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore Sinek's insights on vulnerability, the importance of building trust,
Okay.
and his inspiring call to live a life of service to something greater than ourselves.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into Simon Sinek and this idea of the next 50 years, one thing that keeps coming back to me is this idea of serving something greater than ourselves.
It's like a thread that runs through the whole thing, right?
Yeah, like whether he's talking about leadership or finding purpose or building connections.
He always comes back to that idea.
That real fulfillment comes from contributing to something bigger
Than ourselves.
than ourselves. Exactly. And he uses this really interesting analogy of Olympic athletes.
Okay.
Think about those who dedicate their lives to winning a gold medal.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with striving for excellence.
Right.
But Sinek points out that often those who are solely focused on personal achievement, they end up feeling lost once the goal is reached.
Like they've climbed to the top of the mountain and there's nothing there.
It's like, what now?
Exactly. Their whole identity was wrapped up in this one pursuit.
And then it's over.
And they don't know what to do with themselves.
It's like they've been running a race. But they forgot to ask themselves why they were running in the first place.
Yeah, they didn't have a bigger purpose.
And Sinek contrasts this with people who find their purpose in service to others.
Okay.
Whether it's raising children or building a business that solves a problem or dedicating their lives to a cause they believe in.
These people find fulfillment in contributing.
In making a positive impact.
On the world.
On the world, exactly. And it's not just about achieving something for themselves.
Right.
It's about creating something bigger, something that benefits others.
That makes a difference.
And this brings us to Sinek's perspective on vulnerability.
Okay.
Which he sees as a key ingredient for both personal growth
and effective leadership.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
How so?
Because he doesn't talk about vulnerability in the typical oversharing way.
Like spilling your guts to everyone.
It's not about, for him, vulnerability is about creating a safe space where people feel comfortable admitting mistakes, asking for help, and being their authentic selves.
So it's about dropping the pretense of perfection.
Exactly, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers.
And that's crucial for building trust.
Which Sinek sees as the foundation of any strong relationship.
Absolutely.
He emphasizes that trust takes time and effort to build.
But it can be broken in an instant.
He gives the example of companies that betray the trust of their employees.
Oh, yeah.
through layoffs, unethical practices, a lack of transparency,
That can really damage morale.
and have a long-term impact on a company's reputation.
Yeah, who wants to work for a company they don't trust?
Exactly. And it's a reminder that trust is a precious commodity.
Once it's gone, it's hard to get back.
And Sinek also talks about how this culture of invulnerability is actually holding us back.
Individually and collectively.
It's like we're all wearing these masks,
Pretending to be something we're not.
afraid to let our guard down,
And that prevents us from forming genuine connections.
from learning from our mistakes.
From reaching our full potential.
And it creates a culture of fear and distrust,
Where people are afraid to speak up.
afraid to take risks.
So how do we break free from this cycle?
How do we cultivate more vulnerability?
In our lives and our workplaces.
Sinek challenges us to be more open and honest,
With ourselves and with others.
to embrace our imperfections,
To create environments where vulnerability is seen as a strength.
not a weakness.
He gives the example of his own experience with therapy,
Oh, wow.
where he learned to confront his own vulnerabilities.
And to ask for help.
He says it was a transformative experience
That allowed him to connect with others on a deeper level.
and to become a more effective leader.
It's a great reminder that we're all in this together.
We all have our struggles, our insecurities.
Our moments of self-doubt.
And when we're able to acknowledge those things,
To let go of the pretense of perfection.
we create space for genuine connection.
And for growth.
Absolutely. And Sinek emphasizes that this is not a sign of weakness.
It's a sign of strength.
It takes courage to be vulnerable,
To show up authentically.
but let ourselves be seen for who we truly are.
And I think that's what makes Sinek's message so powerful.
He's not offering a set of rules or a formula.
He's inviting us to embrace our humanity,
To connect with our purpose.
to live a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling.
He's challenging us to think differently about success, about leadership,
About what it means to be human,
in a world that often values speed and efficiency
over connection and empathy.
and service to something greater than ourselves.
And I think that's a really important message, especially in today's world.
We're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should be doing,
What we should be achieving.
how we should be living.
But Sinek's message is a reminder to pause,
To reflect.
to ask ourselves what truly matters.
What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind?
It's about shifting our focus from ourselves to others,
From personal gain to contribution.
from fear to love,
Recognizing that we're all interconnected
and that our actions have a ripple effect.
on the world around us.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Simon Sinek and his vision for the next 50 years, I think the key takeaway is this: we have a choice.
A choice.
We can choose to live a life focused on ourselves,
Chasing fleeting pleasures.
superficial achievements,
Or we can choose to live a life of purpose.
meaning and service to something greater.
Than ourselves.
We can choose to hide behind a mask
Or we can embrace our imperfections.
and create space for genuine connection.
We can choose to live in a world driven by fear.
Or we can work to build a world based on empathy and compassion.
The choice is ours.
And as Sinek reminds us, the next 50 years are waiting to be shaped by the choices we make today.
So what will you choose?